with 2 games to go in 2021, only 2 teams had locked up their playoff spots. In 2022, 3 teams out of 6. In 2023, it was 2 teams.
Yep.
Going into this weekend,
6 teams who had locked up spots.
That's 75% of the field.
Yeah.
No more than a third over the previous 3 seasons had done that with 2 games to go. That really does tell you what this league is like now.
But some teams this weekend could have locked up a playoff spot, and they fucked up.
Fucked up hard.
And by that, I mean one team. Hello, and welcome to Expected Own Goals, where the rubber meets the road edition. I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. Do you feel like the season's overcorrected in terms of parity? Like last year, we saw the most extreme levels of parity that maybe we've ever seen in any league ever of any sport. And this year, this is the most serious disparity since 2018. And if you look at it from another lens, it might be the most unequal season the NWSL's ever had, period. Just because, like in 2018, that was being driven by the Courage at one end, Sky Blue at the other. Here, it's like 4 teams at the top, where like their XG differential per game could be in the mix for like top 15 all time. Those 4 teams in this season. We've never had like 3/4 of teams have their playoff berths be locked up with 2 games to go. Like, has the pendulum swung too far in the other direction?
I just feel like this is regular variance that we're seeing play out season by season.
But it's not regular variance for this league. That's the thing.
Of course. Maybe there's greater disparity this year, but that top 4 is so level. Mm-hmm. Like, there's not a lot to distinguish between them. And I think when you stop talking about parity, like when you talk about parity, where you stop is by saying, like, there aren't at least a handful of teams that could be champion. Right now, I think, going into the playoffs, there are 4 very solid candidates to be champion of this league.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, there is a fair amount of parity within the tiers of this league. And when we did our preseason prediction, we kind of shaped it like that, and that is what it is played out to be. So I guess I feel like this is where I thought the league would correct. Maybe not this cleanly, or maybe not with the tiers this distinctly divided. Mm-hmm. But has it led to us having an exciting final day of the season coming up? No, maybe not. That said, there are 3 teams competing for 2 spots. And given the form of each of those teams, I feel like there's actually a fair amount of wiggle room for some weirdness to happen on the final day. I still stand by my feeling that Portland and Bay are in, despite Portland's calamitous loss in Louisville this weekend.
Yeah.
That said, no, I think where this starts getting really interesting is in the jockeying for playoff matchups that happens in the top 4, because there's all to play for sort of seeding, and then the ramifications of like who faces who. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm not. I guess I'm not disappointed by this season. It certainly doesn't possess the madness of going into last season, but I do feel like we're going to have a worthy champion in the way that Gotham, who ultimately was a worthy champion, wasn't last year. I think we're going to have a team that, like, I think whoever wins this league, oh boy, I might eat no goal on this one, but I think whoever wins this league is coming out of that top 4, and I think is going to be a fully deserving champion.
Yeah, I think that's right. I personally have loved how great Kansas City, Orlando, Washington, and Gotham have been. We have not seen a team with that level of front-to-back quality, and to see 4 of them all at the same time, I don't know if we've ever seen that. As we always talk about, like, how do you balance the quality of a league relative to, do you want every team to be pushed toward the center so every game is incredibly competitive? Do you want distance so you have truly elite teams that are like super fun to watch and super exciting to watch and historic to watch at the expense of parity? How do you find the sweet spot in the middle of that? I think Kansas City, Orlando, Washington, and Gotham have been great for the league this year. And there are a lot of like structural reasons that it's occurred like this season, which you can read about in my article at Equalizer.
Good plug. Good plug.
But in terms of form, so we've had 7 games since like all the summer signings kind of officially bedded in early September. So in the last 7 games, Washington's got the best non-penalty XG differential, plus 6.4. And Chicago is bringing up the rear at negative 8.4. And then among the teams that are still in the playoff hunt, Bay's at the top of that grouping, plus 1.1. Portland, negative 2.7. Louisville, negative 4.15. So if we go by the form theory, Bay and Portland are still in the driver's seats.
Yeah.
And then if we want to say that by form, does momentum carry you to a playoff championship? There are data points to say yes, there are data points to say no, which probably means it's all noise and it doesn't mean much. But by that logic, you would say that maybe Washington's in the best position. But for their injuries, and if you want to ding them for that, then you say Kansas City's in the best position to win the whole thing.
Which is funny because my gut says I actually prefer probably Gotham or the Pride over Kansas City or the Spirit for reasons that have more to do with individual in-game choices that they end up making. I think Gotham at this point, and I think against a strong Orlando team this weekend, came out and made a real statement and played really well.
I don't know what the hell happened to Orlando's defense. That was bizarre.
Yeah, I'm not going to ding Orlando for what happened against Gotham in the way that I'm going to credit Gotham for what they did against Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's going to be all to play for, but just I have liked Gotham's roster. I know that the expected goal differential on Gotham is the worst of that top 4, but it doesn't change what I think that they are capable of doing on a game-by-game basis.
Mm-hmm.
And considering how much of this season has felt like they've played in second gear, the numbers, which still suggest a very good team, probably undersell the team that I feel like I watch week in and week out. I'm not making some wild extrapolation from the numbers themselves, but you watch the game against the Pride and you're like, man, Gotham, they are putting the pieces together at the right time of the season. The reemergence of Esther, Rose Lavelle looks to be clicking in form. This is a really dangerous team. This will be a really dangerous team in knockouts. I think I'd probably favor having Ankatrenberger in net over almost any other keeper in the league at this point. I just like them. And yet I buy the idea that, the Spirit and the Current are also great champion contenders, to say nothing of the Shield winning Pride. It's just, to me, that's what's exciting, is I feel like we're going to end up with a pretty worthy champion. All of these teams have put together resumes that I think deserve respect and attention.
I mean, to your point, Trevor Larner ran his ELO model for coming into the final week, and the odds of actually winning the championship, there's a spread of 9 percentage points from 20 to 29% between those top 4 teams. So Kansas City's at the top of that grouping, but when your distribution is so tight like that, when you have to win 3 single elimination knockout games, yeah, I mean, anything can happen. I still like Kansas City the most because Chewinga does not seem to be stopping, and their defense is in incredible shape right now. You might want to say that maybe Almut Schultz is benefiting from small sample size, but I don't know.
She's playing well.
She's playing well. So we'll see how that all pans out.
I think this probably leads to the next thing, which is, let's have a little fun here. We're just going to talk about the top 4 for a second. Let's take a look at their fixtures next weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the Pride beat the Reign at home. They've already got one locked up. Fine. Take that one off the board. The Courage and the Spirit. In North Carolina, what do you think the Spirit get?
I think that the Spirit are tough to judge right now just because of the injuries, and we have no understanding of when/if Lacey Santos and Ule Sarr will be able to come back. We actually haven't really talked about the fact that Andy Sullivan blew her ACL. That defensive midfield pairing takes a big step down. I mean, I think Andy Sullivan's probably a little bit overrated relative to her reputation, but she is a steady pair of hands, whereas Heather Stainbrook is very much not. And Hal Hirschfeld, for all of her defensive qualities, is still learning. She's still a rookie.
It's year one.
It's year one. So that maybe gives you a little bit of pause. And with North Carolina at home, I could see North Carolina potentially winning that game, especially seems like Caroline's back, and that changes the calculus pretty considerably. I could see the Courage eking out a win there.
I could see Washington dropping points there. I think Gotham going to Utah. Utah, as we saw in person on Sunday, Utah's playing some pretty nice football.
Except when they get into the box. Like,
I don't think they're playing nice enough football to be Gotham right now. I feel like Gotham gets the job done there. And I think the Current against the Red Stars.
Yeah.
I think the Current get a win there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would leave us with Gotham in the 2 seed, the Current in the 3 seed, and the Spirit in the 4 seed.
I mean, it doesn't feel incorrect. I mean, I still think Kansas City's the best of that foursome.
I think that would be a huge advantage to them.
Be very interesting to see Kansas City play Chicago 2 weeks in a row, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, if they finish in the 3rd seed, there's a very decent chance that happens.
Yeah.
In which case, I love Kansas City against Chicago twice.
Especially at home for the quarterfinal.
Yeah.
And then that would make Orlando go up probably against Bay. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the table stays where it is. Gotham would play Portland, 2nd year in a row where they meet in a round of playoffs. This time in New Jersey.
Then the Spirit and the Courage would also get a rematch.
Yeah, 1 week later.
So we potentially have 2 week 26 rematches immediate in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that basically goes chalk except for Washington, North Carolina. And again, that just all depends on health.
Totally.
You know?
And frankly, I think that Washington at home,
yeah,
Washington has been rolling out a depleted set of lineups.
Yeah.
And still getting good results.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to believe at this point that with a healthy Trinity Rodman and a healthy Rosamund Kwasi, they kind of can do a lot already.
Sure.
I'm inclined to believe that Jonathan Heraldez has this team dynamic enough and well enough drilled at this point that they can overcome any of the teams that finish 5-8. Again, with full reasonable soccering available to happen, I don't have any sort of like major hesitation about the Washington Spirit, other than the fact that like at some point they may just succumb to injury.
All right, let's say Washington wins that quarterfinal. So it's Orlando, Washington, and Gotham, KC. Who do you take?
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting.
I mean, those games are coin flips, basically.
Gotham hosting KC. My gut edges that to Gotham. KC is the best team on paper this season. You're not going to get me disputing that at all. And yet, I feel like Gotham have some of the better tools available to neutralize Temwa Chawinga.
I don't know if I agree with you there. For one thing, we don't know if Tierna Davidson's going to be healthy.
That is a huge question mark
and
for sure.
Listen, we've sung the praises of Sam Hyatt as being probably the best depth center back that any team's got. So the drop from Davidson to Hyatt is not as steep as it would be in another team's setup.
And there's still Emily Sonnet and Jess Carter, and there are defensive tools that can be thrown at the Chawinga front. As much as any team can throw any set of defensive things at the Chawinga front. We're talking about real coin flips at this point. I think it's a coin flip between Orlando and Washington. I think it's a coin flip between Gotham and KC.
Just to continue raising the banner for KC, if we want to talk about defense winning championships, the team that's conceded the fewest goals and the fewest XG over the last 7 games is Kansas City. I think when we talk about like the best pieces to neutralize your weapons, like it's not as though KC is a bunch of defensive pushovers when Esther, Lynn Williams, and Yasmin Ryan are going to be pushing up against them. Because of those 3 losses in a row plus the draw in that like 3 to 5 game mix right after the Olympics break or just before and right after, that's really stuck in people's brains because it looked really bad. And it was really bad. Like they were very defensively poor, but they were also in the middle of transitioning their goalkeeper and both of their center backs. That is no small thing. And once you got out of the woods of that period, they have been nails. Like they do not give up good chances. And I think that
totally true.
If you do not hit them really, really fast out of the back, you're not going to really get a lot of opportunities, especially if you want to build out of the back, because Chewinga is the best defensive forward in the league. The other thing that, like I've mentioned on the show before, but is going criminally under-discussed about why she should be the unanimous MVP. It's not just the goal record. It's that she basically creates her own chances by pressing and winning tackles in the attacking third on her own. Like, she is a very unique individual in that regard. So I think that Kansas City can come out and punch Gotham in the mouth really, really fast. And I think Gotham would have a difficult time getting a foothold. That being said, if Gotham won that game, I would not shock me.
Other than the fact that they have to play a road playoff game, almost certainly. Look, if Kansas City locks up that 2 seed because Gotham and the Spirit slip up this weekend, my confidence interval with Kansas City goes up significantly.
Sure.
But I don't love them having to travel. It's the thing that gives me some measure of pause. But also, like, whatever. All these teams are so close.
Make of this what you will. Gotham and KC in their 2 games came away with a 2-2 aggregate scoreline, and the current edged Gotham plus 1.6 non-penalty XG in aggregate. So the results were even. The current had the better of the chances and conceded fewer good chances, but the results equaled out. And so, yeah, I mean, if the game's 1-1 after regulation, you really throw the script out then.
And how much do you want to make of the Orlando Pride, their 2-game wobble after settling up the Shield?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, losing to Portland felt like a write-off because they had rotated basically half the lineup, including a lot of the defense. Last week is what is so strange, because everybody you would want, except for Carson Pickett, was there. And, like, you can't really say that it's Carson Pickett that's holding you back, because your defense was very good before she showed up. So Kylie Strom, Emily Sams, and Carrie Abello looked really overmatched. I don't know what their plan was. Like, was this a reflection of just trying something new and it not coming off? Like, how stressed is Seb Hines about that performance, I wonder? It's 1 game, so you can write that off. And again, I'm not totally proponent of, like, your form or your momentum going into the playoffs somehow dictates your performance in the playoffs. But it is an outlier that doesn't have a particularly good explanation for it as far as I can see. I mean, did you see anything in that game that you could tease out for why they got hammered?
Particularly if you look at, like, the XG race chart.
Yeah.
It's really not complimentary to the Orlando performance, which I actually think is the best expression of the game that I watched, which is to say one in which Gotham exacted a fair amount of control, conceded a penalty after going up, and then immediately reestablished control. And but for a handful of chances after already leading, conceded to Ali Watt, pretty much walked this game.
Yeah.
Like, once up 3-1, Gotham probably got a little lax in defense and weren't punished for it. But the Pride really struggled to generate high-quality chances.
Yeah, they did.
For huge portions of this game, and I felt like, I mean, Banda draws the penalty and is incredible, but Gotham have shown a pretty solid ability to manage games, certainly games that they lead. And I felt like this was just another expression of that. So am I concerned? There's not a lot, if I'm Seb Hines, to look at from the Portland game.
Yeah.
And feel like we're going to have, like, learnings here. This game, you conceded 2 XG. You lost the game by a goal in XG, 2 goals in reality.
Yep.
Your only goal came off a penalty.
Yep. And
when you were able to generate your best chances, you were already in a game state portion of the game where stuff was screwed. Yeah. That bodes well for Gotham and is something that Orlando will need to recover and learn from.
It's also funny, though, that we're talking about this, and, like, if this result had occurred in, like, May, and
we would not give a shit.
No. Yeah. And, like, because, like, and then everything else went as it has, Orlando would just be, oh yeah, they lost a game early in the season, and no one would think about it. It's just that there was this unbeaten run that has completely skewed our perspective on, like, what Orlando can do.
It's why what I said earlier, this is, for me, a point in the column of Gotham good and not a point against Orlando in the Orlando bad column.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is, I felt like what I saw from Gotham is a team that is starting to fire on all cylinders going into the playoffs, capable of dominating another elite team in this league. And this is an Orlando team who I will forgive for this because the sum total of their performances over the course of the season, you're all allowed a bad game.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid you have a bad game on the road once once the standings don't mean anything against one of the better teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
There's an asymmetrical award or lack of award that one can give out of this. All right, let's move on to, this is a nice time, the eulogy for Utah.
Let's pour one out. I mean, they were officially eliminated on Saturday before they had even gotten to play that weekend. I mean, you have to say they've got to be the most improved team from before the Olympics break to after the Olympics break. In the 16 games before the Olympics break, Utah had a non-penalty XG differential per game of negative 1.1, which was dead last in the entire league. In the 9 games since returning from the Olympics break, they got a non-penalty XG differential per game of plus 0.3, and that is 5th in the league.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Jimmy Conrates and some solid veteran signings. And the removal of Amy Rodriguez.
I think I tweeted something to the effect of, turns out that hiring a young Belgian manager and a classy Spanish midfielder can work wonders. But it's true. It's still a team of a lot of ragged parts. You know, it's not like Claudia Zornoza and Chloe Lacasse can just completely paper over everything. But in terms of like midfield progression against weak defensive sides, like we saw against Angel City on Sunday, they are very sharp and very cohesive and actually seem to have an attacking identity that they didn't have before. They claimed to have one and then it just would completely fall apart in practice. But I don't think they were a very good team in the aggregate, and I don't think that they probably deserved a playoff spot despite the turnaround. But these are incredibly promising building blocks that they can take into 2025. That's worth highlighting. Madison Pogarch had a really great game on Sunday, bombing up the left wing. Zornosa is just, despite her age, she does not need to have a great deal of like athleticism or quick bursts when she's playing that deep. She just needs to have great touch and great vision, and she's got those things in spades because she's a Spanish midfielder.
I want to give credit here to the oft lamented Allie Sentner on this podcast, because not for the 19 shots she fired from outside the box in this game,
give or take,
but she and Mina Tanaka were doing so much of the running that allowed Zornoza to sort of use her passing and movement.
Yeah.
They were doing other people's running. And, you know, like when you have Claudia Zornoza in the midfield distributing the ball, and you have willing runners spreading the field and compressing the field in interesting ways and moving defenders out of position, forcing the issue, when you have those things happening, good things will occur.
Yeah.
And Allie Sentner, if she learns to stop firing those shots and to start laying off the ball, and she did a couple times in this game, the natural ability, you know, it's like the next thing Jimmy Conrates needs to do is to harness like her skill set. But she's one of the most dangerous players in this league running with the ball. It's just like wildly misused by her own decision making at this point.
Yeah, which is why I said earlier in the show that as good as they would often look in terms of progressing into the final third, once the rubber met the road inside the box, it all kind of just fell flat again, as it has for a lot of the season.
Totally. And yet, this is a team, Utah, for stretches of this game, absolutely dominated and looked relatively together on defense. I think that we have both been really pleasantly surprised by a team who went and added components that made all aspects of their gameplay better and began displaying a tactical approach that really expressed the talent that they had as best as was possible.
And yet,
it's really interesting.
Again, coming back to their decision-making and their activity in their attacking penalty area, you pull the lens back. The field tilt was 50-50. Shots in the box were dead even, 9-9. XG per shot, 0.08 to 0.05 in Angel City's favor. So they were getting better looks. And actually, the model by ASA puts it at like 0.12 to 0.06. So it was an even more stark level of quality there. And then Angel City had 33 touches in the box to Utah's 15.
Oh, yeah. We're not saying Utah's a good team.
They are on an upward trajectory, but this season, just a little bit too little, a little bit too late, but they'll get there. I'll be interested to see if Konrads gets a permanent deal. He's done enough to earn it, and he's young. He's 29, the youngest coach in the NWSL since Mark Parsons, I think. So he has the potential to be a stalwart for many, many years to come. We'll see. I think 2025 is looking up for Utah. That doesn't mean they're going to be a playoff team next year either, but they will no longer have the expansion growing pains to work their way through.
No. The Amy Rodriguez Utah Royals that we were so down on at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it's not the same team
are
anymore.
gone.
Yeah.
Are gone. And in their place is a team that looks absolutely headed in the right direction.
Yep. 1,000%.
All right, let's talk about another team and whether they're headed in the right direction as we continue this whip around. We've already, the aforementioned Kansas City Current, who continue to bludgeon opposition in a healthy manner. The San Diego Wave, this is a beatdown that they took.
Yeah.
What do you make of this?
San Diego's played well over the last several games, but they had defensive holes, and they had not faced a lot of attacks with the kind of potency of Kansas City. So if the Donovan era Wave were going to get pummeled like this, it was going to be by the Current. So whatever. I mean, San Diego's season was over a week ago, so it's not as if they really had anything to play for except for pride. And
no,
you're going to only be able to do so much of that when your main flaw is defensive organization and you have Debinha and Temwa Chewinga breathing down your necks for 90 minutes. Yeah, that's about it for me.
I'm in awe of Temwa Chewinga, not only for her continued assault on all-time goal records, but for scoring against every single team in the league
in the same
this season.
Yeah, no one's ever done that before. Crazy.
This is some Serena Williams bullshit where you're just like grabbing records people hadn't even conceived of before.
Yeah. We all chuckled earlier in the year when Ashley Sanchez broke the scored on every active team in her career record.
Chewinga's doing like Otani shit at this point. It's really delightful. I'm thrilled for her, and I'm thrilled for the Current. All right, let's dead rubber match. Be honest. Did you watch the Seattle Reign and Houston Dash?
I had it on in the background.
I did not watch this game. I have watched the highlights. I don't feel like I'm qualified to say anything other than, can this season end for these two teams? Please.
Yeah, it was a pretty boring game outside of the Mondesir goal. Otherwise, it was a real grind. And you don't expect anything else. Again, another two teams that need to hit the reset button really, really hard in the offseason. But it's just so weird. Like the penultimate weekend of the regular season, and we had two games where there was literally nothing at stake for either team involved. And that's just so weird.
Of these two teams, whose future are you more fearful for?
Oh, Houston.
You're more fearful for Houston's future.
Because Houston didn't change their ownership, and Houston has not demonstrated any ability to create a winning culture at the level of staffing, at the level of personnel, player personnel, at anything. And this season was just another symptom of a disease that has been festering inside their dark hearts since their inception in 2014. This is just a bump in the road for the Reign. It was been a slow-moving car crash for almost a couple of years, and they kept things at bay last year because of getting to the championship. But it came to a head because of the ownership questions, and they weren't able to spend money, and they weren't able to be as competitive in either the winter or the summer markets because players had no idea what was going on. Again, I'm not saying anything we haven't said a million times about this team. However, the Carlisle Group with the money and the Seattle Sounders with the infrastructure and the operations know-how are in place and now have the chance to reset come this offseason, and the Reign are not a team that is unfamiliar with winning. They've won 3 Shields. They've been to 3 championship games. They've never gotten the big one, but like they know how to do this. I think the only question is like, what do you do with Laura Harvey? Do you keep her? Because it's hard to say that it's her fault this year, but there's also that whole like maybe you just need some new ideas in the room thing. I don't know. I don't know what like the Sounders and the Carlisle group are thinking, but I think it's going to take a lot less time for the Reign to get back on their feet. Maybe not next year, but it's going to be, no more than 2 or 3 seasons. Whereas Houston, I don't know what the fuck you're going to do.
Yeah, I suppose the only argument I would make in favor of Houston in this case is it seems a lot easier to clear the deck here as opposed to, because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking out an institution like Laura Harvey should you make the decision to move on from her.
Harvey has a lot less soccer operations control than she used to. So in terms of that sort of thing, like Leslie Gallimore is expendable. Despite her history with Seattle soccer, like you can get rid of her more easily if you feel like it, if you feel like that's the right choice.
The answer is obviously I would rather have the Reign's problems than Houston's problems.
Yeah.
Almost across the board. And if my defense is it's easier to get rid of problems in Houston, that means Houston probably still has the problem.
Before we get off this point, I just want to pull up what each team's off seasons look like in terms of free agents. It might actually be easier for Seattle to cull some dead weight. Here are the players who are out of contract this fall. Lauren Barnes, Jess Fishlock, Hannah Glass, Laurel Ivory, Ziara King, Quinn, Nikki Stanton, and Olivia Athens. A lot of those are depth pieces, but a not insubstantial number of them are former nailed in ink starters that you probably should not be starting anymore, like Barnes, Fishlock, and maybe even Quinn. Whereas with Houston, like Andressa, Alyssa Chapman, Jalissa Harris, those are like the 3 players who have gotten substantial minutes. Oh, Bella Breed, I guess, too. Like, those are only 4 players who have gotten substantial minutes. And they've got a lot of other pieces who are going to be sticking around, who are under contract, that like including like Sophie Schmidt and Ellen Rubinson and Sarah Puntigam and Yuki Nagasato, like players who are not necessarily young. So that I worry about with Houston, that there's maybe more juggling of balls that they would have to do in order to like tear things down to the studs. But I don't know. I do not know what Houston's plan is because they don't have a GM and they don't have a head coach.
Totally fair. Those are positions that should be filled as soon as humanly possible. All right, let's move on and talk very briefly about the bloody battalion, the Civil War suffering, gangrene-riddled Washington Spirit, who still somehow managed to undress and embarrass the beleaguered but playoff-bound Chicago Red Stars. Evan, you went off on the city of Chicago and their...
Excuse me? No. Don't you dare. Don't you fucking dare. I had issues with the Chicago Red Stars specifically. I love Chicago. Chicago's a great city. Now, this game was very silly. I mean, apparently there is a sentiment among both players and certain fans who think that if you get your hair pulled, you should just be able to retaliate like it's hockey and not get a card. Like, it's not a cardable offense. Just like if someone yanks at your ponytail, you get to yank back, and that's the end of it. But that's not how it played out. Rosamond Kwasi and Ludmila both got sent off within 2 minutes of each other for yanking on each other's hair. And in a game where Chicago was not exactly doing much offensively anyway, barring like a couple of moments of quality, game was pretty much over after that. And McKenna Morris drove the nail into the coffin. Again, I am not afraid of Chicago if I am anybody in the top 4 that they could potentially be facing. It's a very weak and very brutal team. And if Ludmila and Swanson aren't available to score you goals, then don't know what you do except ride your luck. Ride those vibes, baby.
Yeah. And the Spirit look, I don't know, they look real solid.
I mean, for as untested as Heather Stainbrook is, she scored a heck of a goal.
Yeah, McKenna Morris is, she's got 5 goals on basically 5 XG this year in just under 500 minutes?
Something like that. Yeah, she's been value for money.
Yeah, but it's just the depth pieces keep on clicking. All right, let's move on and talk Bay FC North Carolina Courage, a game that was crucial for Bay to win and that did eliminate a fair number of teams from playoff contention.
Two, but yes.
Meaning Utah and Angel City, who would face each other the next day in Los Angeles, along with Julie Ehrman, who also eliminated Angel City from playoff contention. Bay FC, man, how good is Rachel Kundananji?
It never ceases to amaze me how she could have been an MVP contender, but for Banda and Chowinga. I don't want to take away from the offensive contributions of Tess Bodie and Penelope Hawking, but it all just runs through Kundananji. It's just unavoidable.
Yeah, she's the engine. She's remarkable. And if you're looking for the kind of player who could, in the playoffs, be like a game changer and really help a team, a low seed, go and beat a high seed in these playoffs, I think Rachel Kundananji's like got to be right at the top of your list for players that can cause nightmares for any defense. And in this game, it just sort of felt there was an inevitability to the Dahlkemper goal. And at various points in this year, maybe that hasn't come through for Bay, but they felt solidly on the front foot for me throughout this match.
Oh, yeah. No question.
And the goal is a byproduct of a lot of pressure. And finally, a very good dead ball, another thing Rachel Kundananji apparently has in her locker, to Abby Dahlkemper, who, it's one of the more awkward finishes I've seen in a while, because she sort of like slices the ball back across herself, but it's so clean and good. Yeah, do you still have Bay enthusiasm? Is Bay your team of the 5 through 8 that you expect to get an upset? If you were to expect such a thing, like if you had to pick one, is Bay the team likeliest to do it?
Man, it really depends on where they finish, and that is really up in the air. I mean, right now they're sitting in 8th still.
Probably where they will finish.
Yeah, so Bay is 37% to finish in 8th, 31% to finish in 7th, 24% to finish in 6th. That is a 3-sided coin flip right there. It's hard for me to say, can they beat Orlando? Is it better if they face Washington? Is it better if they face Gotham, KC?
And Bay is 8% to not be in the playoffs as well. So there's that.
Yeah. Going by our little 7-game post-summer signing stretch run window that we've identified here, they're 7th by XG differential per game, but that's better than North Carolina. That's better than Portland. It's better than Chicago, obviously.
Yeah, this is what I'm asking.
So if there is a team to get an upset, it's probably them, but it's still going to be really hard for them to do.
Absolutely.
Because Bay have lost all 8 games that they've played against the top 4 this year. In terms of aggregate XG scorelines, they're negative 0.8 against Kansas City, negative 3.0 against Gotham, negative 0.4 against Orlando, and negative 1.6 against Washington. Those are small samples. Again, single game knockout on the road. Anything can happen. So maybe you think that Gotham is the scariest of opponents, and that 5-1 is very recent in the memory.
Yes.
So if I'm Bay, maybe I just hope that I avoid Gotham, because 2 1-0 losses with an aggregate XG split of negative 0.4 against Orlando, maybe there's something there, especially because Bay is such a better team now than they were when they faced Orlando the first time back in May. So I don't know. Maybe that's an upset waiting to happen. Could see it. It would be very poetic, too, if it ends up being Bay and Orlando in the first round, because it'll be Kundananji versus Banda.
I suspect Orlando will still take that game. But yes.
Probably. But it's not uninteresting that, given how inconsistent Bay has been for a lot of the season, especially against the top 4, even in this current regeneration of the team, that they played Orlando pretty tough.
Yeah.
I do just want to say one thing is that this is who North Carolina is. We don't need to belabor it too much, but like they are actually, besides Chicago, maybe the most overrated team in the league right now.
They're fine.
They're not even fine. They are 11th in XG differential per game in the last 7 games.
You're right. They're not fine. The general feels throughout this season, and particularly of late, have been meh to meh minus. We are probably not your favorite podcast if you're a North Carolina Courage fan, and I wish I could say something more invigorating to you.
Yay, Caroline.
Yay, Caroline being back. This team is not a team I would be afraid to face in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the one wrinkle maybe you can throw is that what does a relatively fresh Caroline do in these kinds of situations? I don't know. They played Gotham really, really tight. They beat Gotham all the way back in March. So maybe you say that's a preferred matchup if Gotham slips to 4th, which is unlikely, but it could happen. But also, you've been terrible on the road, but that also might not mean much. I just think like North Carolina has to really hang their hopes to move on to the semifinals on what Caroline is in this moment in time.
Yep. All right, let's get on to our big, and I don't know how much there is to break down in this particular game, but our matchup of the week.
Yeah.
A real playoff 6-pointer that looked like a real dud until favorite of the pod, Taylor Flint, used her 17'7" frame to head home a pretty brilliant winner off former Portland Thorn Janine Becky.
This is also one of those results I know that maybe if you're ready to dance on Portland's grave, or if you're a Portland fan who's gnashing your teeth and rending your garments, you might feel pretty bad about this because it's such a late winner that ends up losing you a point out of what could have been a 0-0 draw, and which would have gotten you into the playoffs. If you are in that sort of doomsaying space, like you lost on a corner kick booted by Janine Becky to the head of Taylor Flint. Like, what are you supposed to do as a defense on a corner kick, you know?
Well, in the case of Isabel Obeys, get ball side would have been a good answer to that.
Yeah, but you still have the goal scorer who's 5 inches taller than you.
No, absolutely. The get goal side is a funny little statement I'm making, because the answer is Taylor Flint took up a position that she needed to be bossed out of before the set piece began. She wasn't. The ball is played pretty inch perfect onto her head, and Shelby Hogan is unsighted by the combination of Flint and Obeys and finds herself pretty much unavailable to make a save. It is a disappointment if you're Portland.
Portland's had worse and more deserving losses in recent days than this one.
They won the non-penalty XG in this game, 0.9 to 0.4. This is a 0-0 draw that is separated by a set piece.
And Portland was playing for a 0-0 draw because it would have gotten them a playoff berth. And they were playing on the road, so they were not interested in like stepping out and, you know, exposing themselves unnecessarily. They wanted to soak up pressure. As a result, Morgan Weaver's on the bench. You know, Sophia Smith, who was available, didn't get rolled out into the 11. Izzy DeQuilla and Peyton Linehan were the primary attacking engines. It was not a team that suggested to you that they were trying to put balls in the back of your net.
No. Portland, time and time again, with chances that they had in the first half, I felt were often taking the extra touch to drive themselves from a good XG place to a wider chance slightly closer to goal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that there's not a lot of... I just wonder how much conversation is going on about like where shooting location and like what your shooting location is and how much it matters. It was just like little stuff at the margins. The best sequence that Portland really ended up, and it doesn't result in the best shot of the game for them, happens between Morgan Weaver and Sophia Smith in the second half with some interplay. Weaver is on the break. She delivers it to Smith out on the wing. Smith customarily cuts in from the left wing on her right foot, plays the ball to Weaver, who leaves it dead for Smith. who fires on net weekly to Katie Lund. It was a flicker of what the Portland Thorns were last year and why they were so dangerous, and the pieces that they will need to be catalysts for them to win games. But that's all they got in this game, a flicker.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was ill-considered, poor shots, limited box touches for both teams, and generally a pretty bland outing until a decisive header from one of Louisville's best players of the season.
When your defensive midfielder is your best player and it's not necessarily for her attacking play, this weekend accepted, also tells you why Louisville, playing at home, needing a result to keep their playoff hopes alive, don't produce anything until that corner kick in the 89th minute. Because they have just, especially since the Olympics, have not played with any kind of attacking fluidity. And even this game where Bevianas was putting her best foot forward, having Becky, DeMello, Sears, and Balser all playing together, Portland was just doing a very good job of not letting them get comfortable. DeMello had that sort of like snatched volley halfway through the first half that ends up going wide. But otherwise, What else did they really produce besides Flint's header? You know, and again, a game that they needed to win, and they're playing at home with a loud and raucous crowd. I don't know how big it was, but they were loud and energetic. It's just like every time you start feeling good about this team, they just kind of frustrate you in other ways.
Yeah. And now they hang on with, an outside shot at the playoffs. Let's talk about what each of these teams sort of needs to do.
Trevor Larner, our dear, highly valued Patreon subscriber, his Zelo model right now is putting playoff odds for each of these teams. Portland, 97%, Bay, 92%, Louisville, 11%. Again, you might ask, why is Portland so high when they just lost and they've been playing so badly? Well, it's because they have the most convoluted scenario in front of them to drop out of the playoff picture altogether. Like, they need to lose, and Louisville needs to win big in order for Portland to drop out, to completely be eliminated from the playoffs.
Well, it's even worse than that. It's Portland is in with a win.
Yeah.
They're in with a draw.
Correct.
They're playing Angel City at home.
Yes.
Not the staunchest opponent to begin with. Angel City, who have nothing to play for. Nothing to play for. Let's say they lose to Angel City.
Yeah.
They still can get in if Louisville don't absolutely obliterate the Wave. And also, they can still get in if Louisville absolutely obliterate the Wave, they've lost, and Bay loses to Houston.
Yeah.
Like, it requires so many things not going right for Portland to miss.
Yeah. And again, like, is Portland going to get walloped in the quarterfinal? Yeah, probably. But because of this annoying 8-team playoff field, them's the breaks. We have a pretty poor team, especially defensively, basically just failing upward and scraping through on a 7th or 8th place finish.
Though credit to Portland against Louisville this weekend, they really didn't allow Louisville much. I think half of the XG they conceded, a little less than half of the XG they conceded, was the Taylor Flint chance. And the Taylor Flint chance is a backwards header from the near post.
Right. Yeah.
For once, Portland's D was okay.
Yeah. That is why it still feels pretty natural. Bay, 92%, again, because
to miss the playoffs, Louisville has to win outright. They have to lose. Draw does it for them. A draw does it for Bay. A win against Houston does it for Bay. A loss, provided that Louisville don't beat San Diego, still does it for Bay.
But a Bay loss and a Louisville win will assuredly boot Bay out of the playoff pool because of goal difference.
A loss and a Louisville win, very clean. Louisville is in.
Yep. Which is why they have that 11% attached to their name. Because as we just laid out, there are so many moving parts that are totally out of Louisville's hands in order to get them above the line.
I'll say this. If Louisville gets in, at least one of Portland and Angel City has done something clown car-ish.
Sure. And I would not put it past either of them to do so.
Like Bay losing to the Dash, totally possible.
I had somebody referencing the 5-1 that Angel City put up on Portland last year at BMO Stadium to get them into the playoffs. Trevor running his ELO model with 2 games to go last year, Angel City's playoff odds were at 5%. And the only way they got in was because they put up a crooked number on Portland at home. So the argument being like, well, it's happened before. It could happen again. No, it won't. And I'll tell you why. One, the spread between teams on either side of the playoff line was so much smaller last year. Angel City is already eliminated this year. Angel City is going to be playing on the road. And Angel City in the second half of 2023 is a much better team than Angel City at the end of 2024 is, despite whatever Portland's issues are. So it could happen. It could happen where Portland just absolutely get hammered and Louisville win and the goal difference swings into Louisville's favor. But, oh man, it's really hard to see how that happens. I just don't get it. I just don't see how it happens.
It's tough. All right, let's close out of here.
You want to just quickly chat about U.S. roster for the friendlies? Yeah, contractually, all the Olympics players who were healthy had to be called up. So that accounts for most of the players.
So who's the additional?
So some returning favorites, potentially, are Ava Gaetino, the PSG center back. Haley Mace coming back after quite a bit of time away. Ashley Sanchez, who has not received a call-up. It's been about a year since she was last in the team. Olivia Moultrie's back in the mix. Yasmin Ryan coming back after quite a bit of time away. Alyssa Thompson, who's like riding her hot hand since the Olympics, getting another look in. But then new names who I did not necessarily see coming, but I am not mad about them getting called up. Alyssa Malinson, Emma Sears. Those are cool picks. I like those picks.
I would have loved to have seen what this call-ups would have looked like without being hamstrung by your Olympics roster.
This is just like such a weird international window. Not just because of the Olympics, but also like the real reset for beginning the World Cup cycle is going to be in January, which is a very big open camp where Hayes is going to be scouting a lot of new players. And there's 3 friendlies in this window, so you have to assume a lot of players are not going to be in camp the whole time. So this was just never going to be a moment where you could really evaluate like what the next great U.S. women's national team is going to look like. And that's okay, again, because we have this January camp where we can really see what Hayes might be able to work with in the 2.5 years moving forward from there. So for the immediate term, I think having Malinson and Sears in that environment is super cool. Let's see how they do. You know, maybe they don't stick, but they have more than proved themselves in their NWSL campaigns that they deserve a look. So roll them out.
They have matches against Iceland. I don't know how much you learn when you play Iceland. And then fascinating matchup against Argentina in Louisville next Wednesday.
Yeah, which is the game that I really don't know how Hayes is going to handle because the final weekend of the NWSL season will be in 48 hours time. And she's got players in camp who play for clubs that have playoff stakes. Are they going to be able to be released after the Iceland games? Are they not going to be released after the Iceland games? I don't know. It's all very unclear. It would be very irresponsible and kind of rude of her if she kept a lot of Portland Bay and Louisville players kicking around for that Argentina match. But that's also going to then throw it into question, like how much do we learn from these games? These games just feel like moneymakers to me. They're not blooding new talent moments. They're just celebratory matches for winning a gold medal. But very happy for Melanson and Sears. Very happy for Sanchez for getting back into the mix. Very happy for Thompson. Very happy for Moultrie. We'll see what they can do.
Yeah, we'll still be breaking them down.
Yes. Meticulously. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. You will catch us on Patreon if you are a Patreon subscriber at the end of the week. If you are not a Patreon subscriber, $6 a month gets you 4 bonus episodes every single month, as well as access to our Discord server, as well as our semi-occasional YouTube live streams. We'll be doing those for the playoffs. You will hear us on main feed next week doing some chat about end-of-season awards Be sure to rate us, review us, follow us wherever you get podcasts. Tell all your friends about us. Rate us 5 stars if you are going to rate us at all. Follow us on all social media channels at XOwnGoals. That's the letter XOwnGoals, including Blue Sky. And if you believe we've made an own goal, you can email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com.
Sick.
Cool. Great.
Sick. Talk soon.
Bye.